Okay.
Hello.
Okay. So hello. So this is supposed to be episode one of our podcast, Gen G, right?
For
And
Generation Gap.
for Generation Gap, and I'm probably going to let you take the floor on a lot of this because you've been preparing a lot for this one, way more than I have. But I might surprise myself. I may have more to say. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But and if you ask me questions or I ask whatever, but um, I'm gonna let you start with what in this podcast, this specific topic of this podcast is supposed to be about grief, right?
Right.
So I'm gonna let you tell me what you think, or what we're gonna tell people what we think about grief. So, what do you have to say?
Okay. Well, the name of our podcast is Gen G for Generation Gap. And we named it that because I was 38 years old when I had you. So I'm like 3 generations older than you. So this is our mom and son podcast, Gen G for Generation Gap. We want to show how we think differently because of being raised in different generations. Okay. I decided to name this particular podcast, and I'm glad you went along with it, Grief, because soon after we did our first podcast, I lost my sister, one of my younger sisters. But not only because I lost her, but because over the last few years, we have lost so many family members on both sides of our family, your dad's and mine. Grief is what you feel when you experience loss in your life. And when you feel multiple deaths, when you have multiple deaths in your family, you can get bogged down in grief that you find yourself hard to dig yourself out. So I thought we'd start today by talking about our different experiences with grief. First, why don't we start with you? I think your first funeral was Dia, James's mother's death.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The one I remember vividly in my mind. I don't know. I don't think you do. I don't think you took me to one when I was a baby or anything.
Maybe, but I don't think
Oh,
so. I
well,
don't remember that. The first one I remember you attending was hers. But you were probably
so then I don't
5 or 6 when Dia died.
All right. Okay. Well, I remember that. I remember that. I do remember that vividly.
How did that make you feel?
No, I remember. Do you remember? Well, okay. I will tell people our conversation about it
Yes.
because I do remember a bit from that night because I remember it was that night.
Yes.
I do remember
It was
that.
night.
I remember sitting on your lap. I mean, I guess it was your lap, obviously,
It
in
was
the
my
front
lap,
seat.
yes.
We were going to the funeral. I remember going in. I could have sworn me and some kids were running around somewhere. I don't know. And I didn't feel anything. I felt like we were just at another event. And one of my cousins came in. First, she was fine, and then all of a sudden, I think somebody said she caught a glimpse of Deer from, and then she started crying in the corner. So I really didn't feel anything. I didn't know this was my first experience. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't kind of even know what was going on.
You didn't know what was going on.
Well, and then I remember us going into, I don't know what you call the area where she was.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember certain things, like I remember Dad's brother kissing her on the lips, and I thought, oh, that looks weird. I remember thinking that. I was like, is that okay? I remember thinking that. And then I remember trying to cry because I saw everybody else crying.
Mm-hmm.
So I found a way to do it a little bit, but that wasn't real because I didn't feel anything at all. I was just like, I just want to go home or something. I just remember thinking that.
You weren't really in tune with your emotions at that time.
Oh, absolutely no.
You were so young.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we took you to a funeral, your grandmother's funeral.
You took me to all, well, the ones that were alive. You took me to all three of those.
Right.
I don't know. I don't think Dad's dad had died.
Yeah,
probably.
Dad's dad had died.
But you took me to all the grandparents that were still alive.
Grandparents, right. But what we failed to do was talk to you about what was going to happen. We didn't talk to you about death and dying, and in a way that you would understand it as children. In talking to one of my girlfriends, she told me that she and her sister went to her dad's funeral, and they saw him laying in the casket. But the next day, they went and sat on the porch waiting for their dad to come home from work. I said, well, didn't you see him in the casket? Didn't you know he had died? She said they didn't really understand what death and dying was. So they didn't know. So in the African American family, I think we sometimes, especially when it comes to children, I know my mom didn't explain to me what death and dying was when I went to my first funeral. And I'm glad the first funeral I went to was someone I didn't know. But even with that, it had an impact on me. I remember we had been in church, and my mom said, we're going to go, after we leave church, we're going to go to a funeral. And she took all of us, and we were in the funeral, and I saw the body. And my sister Carrie started crying uncontrollably. Is it uncontrollably? I think it's incontrollably in the word.
Yeah.
Whatever. But anyway, she just started crying. And I didn't understand why she was crying because we didn't know the man. So my mom said, take Carrie outside. So I did. I took her outside. I said, why are you crying so hard? She didn't know, but she was crying because everybody else in the family was crying. So she was empathizing with the family. She was very emotional. I didn't cry, but I think years afterwards, whenever I laid down to go to sleep, I saw that man's face.
Yeah.
I saw his face. I didn't know him. I had never met him before, but that face stayed with me till this day, really. So when I go to funerals, I pass by the casket. You know they have this ritual where you go to see the body.
Yeah.
I never look at the face unless it's someone that I know. Like if it's my mom, my dad, I'm going to see their face no matter what. But if it's a total stranger, I don't look at the face.
Okay.
And that's something that started with me very, very, very young. So I wish my mom had talked to me about it so that I could figure out how to, go to sleep comfortably and a little bit more relaxed. I was very young, and this disturbed me to be able to see, every time I laid down, I'd see that body. But what shaped my view of death, I guess, my mom's talking to me and saying that, and the pastor too in our church, that death, once you die, you go to a better place. You go to heaven. If you're good, you go to heaven. So I never looked at death as being finality. I always thought of it as being a continuation, but in a better place. That you'd be happier and enjoying your life. And so when I think of my parents being dead and my sisters being dead, I think of all of them being together. And I do that to this day. But my mom also told me that it was God's decision when you passed on that, I thought, okay. So when someone died, I said, Mom, it's their time. And she said, no. Later on in life, she told me, she said, no, Laura, some people are pushing it. They're smoking, and they know smoking is bad for you. They're doing drugs. They're driving too fast with cars. They're carrying guns, and they're getting angry, and they're shooting people. So she said, it's not their time. Some people are making a decision for themselves. And that made sense to me, really. It made more sense to me than just saying, because I used to think, why would God take, little babies? Why? Things like that. I used to question that. But what has shaped your view of death? I have to admit, your dad and I didn't talk to you about it.
Well, it's interesting because I think I like a lot of the same things you say. I do see people's face. You talked about your dad. I did see his face. I remember how weird his. I remember how his lips looked. They looked like. And then it's funny because there was this movie with Liam Neeson, in which he was a I don't know what you call them. He was an Undertaker. God, I saw two movies that were so stick in my mind about Undertakers. I remember one specifically where the guy, I think he was in the UK, and it started with him literally sewing through the nose, the mouth, and I'm like, oh my god, why did I see this? Why am I looking at this? So when I saw, what was the name of the movie? I know I don't drive Miss Daisy, and I don't know what that woman's name was from the from uh from Good Time, Esther Roll. I saw her in the casket. So seeing movies with people in the casket, that kind of traumatized me. There were a lot of things that traumatized me because I saw those things when I was younger, whether it be dead bodies in movies. When I was friends with, we used to take me to Carter Funeral Home, and I would did I ever see? I don't. Oh yeah, what did sneak me? We didn't know where I followed him. I'm like, where are we going? And next thing you know, we look in this door, and there's his mom doing makeup on a woman, and I'm like, dude, really? She knew. His mom knew. Why you bringing me here? That's what she said, because she knew. Oh Lord, but yeah, that shaped me because, and then I go into the office in the funeral home, and they have a woman in the casket on a picture, like sitting right there on the desk. You know what is funny? I actually remember the first day crying, thinking, "Can I run into you and be like, I'm gonna die one day?" And I remember thinking that. I don't know. And thinking that was almost like, I don't even know how I figured that out in my brain. It's almost like Santa Claus, like the day you figure out Santa Claus. Except this is the dark part. This is more of like a nightmare part. Santa Claus, find out there's no Santa Claus is bad, but find out you're gonna die one day is also like, ooh, that's rough. And then learning that when you're a kid, so I don't know what my reaction was. I remember my reaction, but and then how you kind of, and then but even then still, because I think before that as a kid, I think you don't think about death. I remember when one of my friends, you'll remember this. I remember, we're not saying names, but I remember one of my friends at Harvard's mom died. And I remember
had I met
her
her mom?
Her mom? I don't know.
I think so. I can't remember the young girl, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a young girl.
I remember. I had met her mom.
Yeah, so that was one of my first experiences of that happening, because I don't think anybody, at least at that time, I don't remember any other person I know personally as a friend, parents dying. So I didn't, so I didn't even know how to react. I didn't know how to react to her dad when he came in. What was I supposed to say? That was my first instance of thinking, man, what do I say to him? This is like the day after, 2 days after. What do I say? I didn't say anything. Maybe if I was a little bit older, I would have known what to say. Like, for instance, when I was at work and a guy said, I lost my wife and I lost my mom a couple of months ago. He was going through this whole role. I just said, oh, I'm so sorry. But I only said that because I know that's what people usually say.
Right.
So, it's been, and it's also like when you start, because you can say, even now, I think of, I remember I even tell people I have more days behind me than I have in front of me. I think of that right now, especially as I get middle aged. I think of that. I don't know what age I'm gonna make it to, but I do think of that. Right, I just think of that right now because because I didn't think about that when I was 18. You just don't. I just feel like I did not think of death. I clearly, when I was younger, I didn't think about it, and then it would never occur to me what would happen if something happened to you or dad, like with the girl I was talking about from Harvard. Would never cross my mind what it would be like to lose you at that age or to lose dad at that age. Would I handle it better? Would I handle it better then? Or I don't know what better means, but how would I have handled it differently if it happened under my teens or even in my teens versus right now? Because obviously you have more responsibilities if you or dad dies right now. Although if one of you died, I guess the other would handle it, the business side of it.
You could lose both of them at the same time, like
True.
in a car accident or something.
True.
Right.
And then, like you said, with my cousins, you told me, you said, well, you have to grow up in that situation. And I will say, those are things that I constantly sit and think. I do try to nowadays, something I never even did even a couple of years ago, plan for scenarios. Okay. Like when you guys go on a trip, and by the way, when you guys go on trips, you always say, here's where the information is.
Right.
But now I definitely say, it definitely runs through my mind right now. Okay, boom, prepare for this or prepare for that. I even have it in my phone. Like, I remind myself to prepare for certain things. I am slowly starting to understand what to do in certain situations, and death is one of those things. Now, obviously, I think that there are certain, probably the funeral homes, like I never walked into there and asked those questions, but I'm almost certain a lot of these funeral homes probably know this person's not ready for this. Let me see if I can give them some consulting on this. Even though, let's be clear, when it comes to money, that's when I'm start asking questions, because I may not have the money. That's where a lot of this burial and funeral things, that's where a lot of this is made. So I feel like now I'm going to have to say, okay, where am I going to get the money for these things?
I've seen what happens often when a wife is not prepared to lose her husband. In some instances, you have a wife who never paid a bill, never didn't even know where the life insurance policies were, didn't know the checking account number, didn't know anything, and so everything was like totally confused. And in that type of instance, you can't be taken advantage of. So your dad and I have tried to prepare you for some of the things because, we're a member of AARP, so they talk about what you do, how to prepare your family for this or that. And I'm on Facebook, so I'm not totally technology illiterate. So I do see a lot of things on Facebook that teaches you how to prepare for your own demise. But what I wish I'd had, though, when you were younger, was Maria Shriver's book where she talks about how to approach children about death and dying. She has a book called What's Heaven, and also What's Happening to Grandpa, because her father had dementia as he aged. So things are changing with Grandpa. And just recently, when my sister Juanita passed, she has a 2-year-old grandchild. And my niece sent me a picture of my sister when she was really ill, and Callie, her little 2-year-old grandchild, touching her. And now that my sister's gone on, my niece Adrian tells me that Callie walks through the house, my sister's house, and she knows, she runs to her bedroom because she's expecting to see her. Or she runs to the kitchen next and she's expecting to see her. What do you say to a 2-year-old when they no longer will see that person they're used to seeing every day and sometimes all day? My sister Juanita was very involved in her grandchildren's lives. So exactly what did you say? And also my other niece my other nieces who lost their mother, my sister Carrie, and they also lost their sister. My nieces lost their sister. What do you say to them early on to prepare them for things? And it's hard. It's extremely hard. And it's nice to have a book. And I went to the library, and that's the generation gap. You go to YouTube, and I'm going to go to the library to find books on death and dying. And so what do you say to children when that happens? How do you talk to them? And now they have books with pictures, so I think I'd be more prepared now to talk to you about death and dying. But there's a book called The Magic and the Tragic by John Tips Paris. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He talks about that if we understand the tragedies of life are linked with beauty, poignancy, and human connectedness, we can build emotional resilience and ultimately reduce our suffering. I think that's a heavy statement, and it's a correct statement. I don't know if you see it the same way I see it, but when I realized that slavery was a big part of our lives, our past lives, and I started to study slavery, and they always talked about in the books how they were picking cotton and chopping cotton and toiling in the fields in the heat, and how the masters would be on horses and with whips in their hands if they made a mistake, if they stopped, and they were given very little water, and they were in this hot sun. So one summer, my dad planted cotton, and he hired us to work with him in the fields. We had to chop the cotton and pick the cotton. I saw my dad working behind the mules, toiling in the fields. He was sweating. And I thought, man, that's my dad. And he was by himself. And I said, that's such hard work. It almost makes me want to cry right now when I remember him by himself toiling in the fields. And then I remember how I felt when we were chopping the cotton that he had plowed, and it was so hot. There was no shade. You were out there in the hot sun. Now, because we weren't slaves, we could just run and get a shade whenever we wanted to. We also could drink as much water as we wanted to, and we didn't have to work from sun up to sundown. When it got too hot around 2 o'clock, we stopped. But the slaves were working from sun up to sundown. And I empathize with the slaves so much. That day when I realized how they had taught so that we could live, I thought, I'm good. Something has to be better than being in this hot field. I made up my mind that day that I was going to college and I was going to make something of myself. And I was going to work as hard as possible to be successful in life, because I did not want the their deaths, the slaves' deaths, to be in vain. To me, if I just went to school and played around and not be serious, their deaths would be in vain. And that's too many people I always knew that I stood on the shoulders of many, and that was too many people dying so that we could live and survive. So when I went to college, I didn't play. I was serious about it. I was not going to have careless sex with someone who did not care about me and get pregnant and not be able to afford to take care of a baby. I knew that my goal when I went, I'm going to be here 4 years and I'm going to finish this. That's going to be it. And I did that. I went 4 years and I finished that. So I knew then that was the magic and the tragic, really. When he talks about the magic, the slaves dying. Now we are the magic. We are living lives that they should have been able to live. So how are we going to sit and smoke ourselves to death or drink ourselves to death or do drugs when so many people died so that we could live? I just didn't want to be a failure because I didn't want their deaths to be in vain. He also writes that we all endure the ache of disappointment and impermanence every day, which means that this is Tipsaris, which means that we all know that we're going to die. And we all have various disappointments from day to day. But some people have goals in mind and they're unable to achieve those goals, and it really disturbs their balance in life. I remember when I had graduated from college and I was doing my internship at the University of Wisconsin, and I had gone out with a public health nurse to visit one of her patients. I was a nutrition student, a dietetic intern, and we visited this family. It was a husband and wife. The wife had been a housekeeper all her life, and both their goals, they had talked about it for years, that they were saving up so they could go around the world. It was a big thing about going around the world in 80 days. So they had saved up their money. They had penny pinched. Their house was they didn't have a big house. You could tell they had saved their money. And then about a month before he was to retire, he had a major stroke. So now she had to feed him. He had to be bathed. He could not do anything for himself. So she sat there and she talked to me about, now she was like, what am I going to do? We saved all this money. Now we can't travel around the world. And so she was so disappointed. And I said to myself that day in talking to her that one of the things I wanted to do was always, if there's something I wanted to do like travel, I was going to do it immediately. I was not going to wait until I was 60 years old until I retired to enjoy life. So your dad and I traveled early on. And even after you were born, we continued to travel. Because of that incident, that's the magic and the tragic. I learned from that. Then fast forward 2025, when your dad and I was traveling recently, I met another this was a white couple. I met another white woman. She had just lost her husband. Mm-hmm. And she was headed to Alaska. Because what they had done, they had set a goal to travel to Alaska. They want to take a cruise to Alaska and visit Alaska together once he retired. But what happened? He died. So now here she was sitting in the train station, because we were in the train station, with his ashes. She was taking him to Alaska. She wanted to leave a little bit of his ashes in Alaska so he will visit Alaska. Mm-hmm. But that's the magic and the tragic. And also what she did, this was her going by herself, no child. She was doing this by herself. What she had learned since his death was to do for herself, to realize she couldn't be a burden to her children, that she had to take this cruise to Alaska by herself. By herself, she had never done that before. So that's the magic and the tragic. So I'm reading the book about the magic and the tragic, and I think it so many times we see death as in as an end all, but it can also be a beginning. And he talked about that. He said, permitting ourselves to feel emotional pain also makes us more effective in our daily lives. And I told you, you remember you and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and I said that one of the things that I would, if your dad and I were to pass, I would love for you to just flourish, for your life to be, for you to grow as a result. And that's what he's talking about. Sometimes death can lead to growth, and it's hard to see. Do you see that? It can be hard to grow, hard to see. It can also be isolating. I remember one of my sisters told me that when what she was experiencing with Juanita's death, she said her friends were not the type of people to visit each other. So she felt isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was home for Juanita's funeral, and I was staying at her home, and my classmates came to see me, and they made me feel so good because that was warming to me. Heart. That made me able to accept her death better, to feel friends and their warmth, and I felt really sad for my sister, who felt that she and her friends didn't visit like that. So we need to start to visit each other more and start to realize that, and that's not a cultural thing. I remember when I was younger, my mom and my dad started a benevolence club, because when someone generally died in the family, not only did they visit each other, but they always took food over to the house, and sometimes the body was at the house. Yeah. I remember going to a friend of mine, his father died, and I remember going to their house to pay my respect with another friend, and his father was at the house.
That happens in a lot of, almost, like I've never seen that, but I know in a lot of Italian movies, that's what I've seen. Almost every Italian movie. I even saw one time where they had the body at a bar. Like, it was at the bar. Yeah, I don't know if at the funeral there, but they brought it to the bar, and that's where they had an occasion. So a bar, I've seen almost every Italian movie. I've seen it at a house. Yeah, it's got to be hard for a house, for it to be at a house, because then you got to live at the house, because
Yeah.
But even though, what was that movie, My Girl? I think it was the movie My Girl, where I believe that was actually their house, and they held funerals at their house. If I'm not correct, I might be incorrect on that, but I believe their house was where funerals took place. So, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's rough. So for people used to visit, take food, and one of my friends, several of my friends sent me money, and I thought, wow, that's a cultural thing, I believe, because I have done that. I have sent money to friends when they lost a loved one. Are you familiar with that? Have you seen that in
money?
Yeah, money.
I mean, I think,
is that a generational gap?
I don't. Yeah, I've never sent any money to anybody, obviously, but no, I don't know.
Now tell me, the first,
maybe because I don't have any money. I don't know.
When you, I know you went to my parents' funeral.
Yes.
But I remember you experiencing your friend Devin. Was that the first close friend that you lost when he died? So
the reason that wasn't because, here's the thing. Yeah, that was, other than you and Dad, like that was my first experience. Let's say someone who you've hugged or you've been around every day. You sat behind them, you helped them, you know, you're in a daily presence of them, somebody like that, you would have been like, wow, that person died.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was, I don't know, that was just one of my first experience of just someone who I was almost saw every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were gone. Now, of course, there have been other people in that same department at my college who have died since then.
But his death really had an impact on you, I remember. And we went to the funeral.
Well, I think everybody who knew he was, you know, because, yeah, I mean, he was a very important part of that department. It reminds me of when I was a kid and I watched this documentary about, I think it had to do with violence and gang violence. And I remember this guy was at, I don't know if it was brother, his friend, somebody's funeral. He was at the gravesite and he literally said, "I'll see you soon." I'm like, did he really just say that? Yeah, he said, "I'll see you soon." I'm like, geez, what was being in a gang like back then? What? So yeah, that was weird. So it had to be interesting at the time in the 90s when gang violence and certain types of violence and rappers who would say things in their own music that made it seem like they were going to die. Right? Like they're like, yeah, I who knows, I'm any day now, very soon, I'm going to die young or something like that. That has just got to be, I wasn't around. Obviously I was very young at that time, but there were seemed like there were songs back then, and a lot of even young men back then who felt like, yeah, I'm not going to make it out of my 20s, or I'm not going to make it into my 20s or something like that. And that was their mindset. So I don't know if that's still a thing, because we're in 2025. I don't think there are a lot of men who think that, even though there are a lot of black men who have no problem going to prison and thinking, yeah, this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life. That's what they think. Like, oh yeah, this is where I'm going to be, or this is where I want to be, or something like that.
This is where I want to be?
Or, well, I know, like, I've seen, obviously I've never, there are definitely documentaries or whatever. I've never been around certain people like that, but I know there are documentaries where people feel like, and I've even seen shows like Orange is the New Black, where you've had prisoners who felt like, I don't feel safe out here. I don't know what it is like to be out here. I've been in there so long. I need to go back. But this isn't what this podcast is about. This talk is about. But I just wanted to.
Well, it's okay. It's you can talk about that, because it's a part of life. A lot of kids have lost their parents to prison life, and they have to go through grief as a result of it. It's a loss. It's a serious loss. I remember when I was a director of academic support services, and we had a literacy class, and people who did not know how to read or write. And it turned out they were mostly people who, almost to the person, had lost their mother or father or both of them when they were very young. And then they were either in foster care or raised by family members who didn't make sure they went to school and grew appropriately to learn how to love and to be loved. So when, as a parent, you put yourself in positions where you're going to go to jail, you're not going to be there to be a part of your children's lives. So you don't know what's going to happen to them. Wasn't it in Orange and the New Black where a mother joined her daughter in jail?
Did that happen in that show? I don't know if that happened in that show, but I definitely know that happened in a movie I saw.
Oh, okay.
When I was younger. I was about to talk about that. Yeah, there was a movie I saw where that's exactly what happened. I think she knew where her mom was, and I guess she committed a crime just so she could join her mom in jail. And
did she have any children?
Who?
The daughter.
I don't know.
You don't know? You can't remember that, huh?
No, this was a long time. This movie was a while ago.
Do you remember my getting very involved in social emotional learning with the public schools here in Chicago. Yeah. We're here in Chicago, ladies and gentlemen. And I raised my son, James, my co-partner here. We raised him in a community that has a lot of violence. We stayed, we did not move. And that's something I have to live with. Maybe we should have left, but
I want to move to a warmer city.
You might.
If
exactly.
I could go back in time, I would say, why didn't she move to Texas?
Well, I would have moved to a safer place, not necessarily a warmer place, but definitely, we should have moved to a safer place. The crime rate in this community was high, and I have to say, we thought we could raise you. We sent you to school outside of this community. We joined a church. We went to church outside of this community. So we didn't really live in this community. We were not a part of the community. And that's something I did wrong. If you move your family to a community, you need to become a part of that community. If I didn't plan on being a part of this community, I should have left ages ago. But since I stayed, I needed to have been a part of it. So that's why I started a block club here to fight the violence. And when I started the block club, when one of my neighbors' sons was killed 1 block from our home. Do you remember that?
Yes.
He was killed 1 block from our home. And what perturbed me about it, he was 23 and you were 23 at that time. And I thought, oh my God, that could be my son laying dead 1 block from our home. So I started to work with the children in the community. I started the block club so we could let them know that they were loved and wanted, and that gang banging should not be a part of their lives. I had seen this documentary about gangs, and it was I think it was a young man who was about 12 at the time. He said that if someone killed a member of his gang, he was going to hunt them down and kill them. He said it so carelessly. And I thought, my God, this 12-year-old boy thinks so little of death and dying that and this is not even his brother he's going to go kill somebody over. This was his a gang member that had died, that may have died, that he said, I'd go kill him. And I thought, wow, who is talking to this child about death and dying? Where's the mother and the father talking about, what are we saying to our children? That they should think so little of death and dying. And that's why when someone introduced me to social emotional learning, I thought we need to make sure children start to learn their emotions, anger and how to control anger, love and the depth of love, empathy, sadness, the emotions that you feel, and letting them know that they are loved, that they do not have to resort to killing others. They can empathize with each other, that killing each other is not appropriate. This is not expected. This is not what you should do in life. That we should be able to die the way God intended for us to die. And definitely that's not by gun violence. So that's why I got very involved in working with the schools, trying to get the public schools to adopt social emotional learning as a part of their curriculum. And they did adopt it. But if you have teachers who do not understand their own emotions, then they're not going to be able to work with children who understand. So it's very important for the teachers to learn it also. And the teachers think that it's up to the parents to teach that. And that's possible. But if the parents don't know themselves how to control their own anger, if they resort to negativity, and the kids see them resorting to negativity, then that, I remember in our community, a couple of houses over, when a 2-year-old who had seen parents light up marijuana cigarettes, click on a cigarette lighter and tried to light up something, paper or something, and start the house on fire, just a couple of doors from our house. So children imitate parents. So to me, parents need to learn more about how to work with their children in their emotional upbringing, and teachers and churches, everybody needs to be. It needs to be a part of the community. You heard the saying, it takes a community.
Takes a village.
Takes a village, yeah. I like to use the terms community. But it takes a village. And when I grew up, I realized that, and my mom did too. That's why the church was very important in our upbringing, in our community. And I grew up in Louisiana, and there were church communities. I think it grew out of the Catholic church, where you have a church community. But the church in my community was a Baptist church, and they had different organizations in their church, Sunshine Band and different organizations, and they did things in the community to engage the children in positivity. And my mom knew that she needed help. My mom was very young when she had me and when she had all of us. So these older ladies taking the younger children and helping them out and teaching them different things. I remember going to a tea when I was, I don't know, maybe 5th or 6th grade in the community, a black community, and I'm going to a tea. And I'm also going and they teaching me how to embroider. My mom had no idea about embroidery, but I learned those things from other women in the community. And that, I think, helped me to get more involved in this community and feel really bad about not getting involved the day that I moved to this community. I don't know why that happened, why I didn't get more involved from day one, but I just didn't. And I'm ashamed of that. But at the same time, I learned a lot in trying to get involved now. That is really difficult. When you working with grown people to plan for children who are not your own, you have to be empathetic. And not all of us have that same empathetic attitude. But anyway, I'm still very emotional about social emotional learning in the schools, and I think I always will be. But I can't carry that load by myself, and I realize that. And I just hope in the long run that it does become a part of the curriculum, seriously a part of the curriculum, and each teacher understands their role, and parents as well understand their role in teaching children how to take control of their anger and how to manage their anger and how to be empathetic toward each other and how to manage their feelings, and also to understand what love is. Understand what love and being able to show love and care for each other, those types of things. That's very important. I think a lot of people, especially in our community, mistake lust and love. And they have a baby, and then that's when they find out they don't really love the person. They don't really care about the person. And so we need to understand emotions and get more involved in it. And we need to do that on a day-to-day basis. I think technology, and eventually I want us to do a podcast where we talk about a book called Tomorrow's Children. It was written by Dr. Mahalia Hines. Her son is Common. You know Common, right? He's a rapper. She wrote a book called Tomorrow's Children because she believes that she thinks that today's children are so involved in technology that schools are involved with technology, that we've taken humanity out of teaching somewhat, taken humanity out of parenting. So often you go to houses and you see children be entertained by their laptops, their what do you call them? iPads, or cell phones. That can happen often. So she talks about how we need to put the humanity back into it, and that technology doesn't necessarily have to take the humanity out of it. And I think that's part of the problem with gangs and killings. I think because they're doing all the computer games where they're shooting and killing people, and the people are popping back up. I think they think this is going to happen in real life. That I'm going to shoot him and he's going to pop back up. No, he is going to be dead. Mm-hmm. And he is not going to pop back up. And you've got to understand that. We also, as Americans, we need to understand what happens when we send young men off to war. If they are involved in killing people, they're not going to come back the same way. But often, especially in the black community, a lot of men have come back to the community after killing people in wars, and they didn't come back the same. They also they brought some of those feelings, those negative feelings, to their families, and they became very brutal husbands, not good husbands. And a lot of them were not offered mental health counseling. And we can also look deeper into the black community and what we feel and think about mental health counseling. We need to change our mind and realize that mental health counseling sometimes is necessary. And I think when men come from the war, they need to be offered some type of help just off the bat. There need to be groups where they get together and talk about their feelings. And I talked to my husband's cousin, because your dad always talks about his dad, remember? And he talks about how his dad was violent in the homes, often not only to his wife, but also to his children. When I talked to your dad's cousin, she said that when he left for the war and when he came back, he was a total different person. He never got any help. He killed people in the war. He learned how to shoot. He was probably 18 years old. You take an 17, 18-year-old and put him in a war where they're killing people, and then you bring them back to the States and you offer them no help? Man, what do you expect? And sometimes they take it out on their families, and it can disrupt families. And we have no idea how many families in the African American community that is disrupted and cause rippling effect throughout the community. We have no idea. They probably suffered from what you call post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and that was. And you've heard me talk about PTSS, post-traumatic slave syndrome. Yeah, so you mix PTSD and PTSS, post-traumatic slave syndrome, put those two together, that's volatile. We are still generations down the road, and I know your generation doesn't, but think about it. We need to just let slavery is over. No, slavery caused there's still rippling effects in our community from slavery. Because especially when it comes to emotions, I think our emotions when we're taken out of our world, our country, and brought to another country where they don't even speak to our language, and we put in a place with people that don't speak to our language, people that look like us, but we don't speak the same language because we didn't come from the same parts of Africa. And then we're not speaking the same language as the people that supposedly bought us. Put us in that situation for 300 plus years, and then not teach us how to read or write. And we don't expect this to have a rippling effect even to this day. I'm preaching, aren't I?
Yeah.
I know I'm preaching. But back to, this is still grief. James, we have to grieve what could have been if things had been, slavery had not happened, what could have been, if families had not been disrupted during that time. People were sold off. I remember watching Roots once, and women had to watch their kids being sold off, their husbands being sold off. They had to learn how to make a life for themselves, continue on. Oh, one thing we did not talk about was suicide. You wanted to mention that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Suicide. We can stop talking about that because I can be on that soapbox for a long time.
What I wanted to say was I said my contribution was gonna be about because I do feel like a lot of, not even just young people but even older people, they don't understand what grief they would cause, in those situations where, because I remember, it's funny you just said something about your mom saying something about some people are pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I thought about interesting when you said that was, what I thought was interesting about that is I've heard people say that was God's will as well. Mm-hmm. And saying things like, well, that was God's will, because even in all those situations where, somebody didn't eat healthy. Mm-hmm. So then they had diabetes, or they didn't go to the doctor, or some people will say, well, that's God, or anything, any little thing. I don't know, but I don't know if it was God's plan for somebody not to go to the doctor or to shoot themselves in the head. I don't know. But some people think, what was that, works in mysterious ways? You never heard that?
God works in mysterious ways.
Right. So I guess that's one of those mysterious ways. Because I know there's always going to be people that say, but that's rough. That I've lost this person, that person. I've lost all these people in my life. That's very hard. That mysterious way is very hard to deal with. So I think they question their faith in that situation. Even though part of me feels like, well, if you're a person that like you said, suicide, I wasn't going to talk about that. I think that because I'm in the online realm a lot, and there have been some online influencers who have committed suicide, like big ones, similar to what's happening in the world. With certain, because whether we like it or not, celebrities have huge influence on people, young people, and so forth. So then those deaths, especially by suicide, are magnified in news media, and for a lot of people, they cry for those sometimes celebrities. And it was funny because I actually felt like, you remember we were talking and I said I thought Whitney Houston committed suicide, and you disagreed with me. You don't think she did. And I also, not only did I feel like at the time Whitney Houston committed suicide, I also felt like her daughter committed suicide, and because I think she committed suicide because she was in grief, because of the grief. Because
the daughter?
Yeah, I think she even did an interview, I think, back then, where she said something like, she left me here. She said that in that interview, I believe she said something like that. So I just feel like if you are taking drugs and you're in the bathtub, bad things are going to happen. And I don't exactly remember exactly what happened completely with Whitney Houston and her daughter, but I believe both had to do with a bathtub. And I felt like, so that's why I felt like, and because her daughter died in a similar fashion, I definitely thought that her daughter was suicide, because for her to do it for her to be in the bathtub and on drugs in the same fashion. Okay, if you don't think that happened with Whitney Houston, I definitely thought at the time, well, that was definitely what happened with her daughter.
But I don't think so. But I don't really think Whitney Houston's.
You said you didn't think she committed suicide.
I don't think she committed suicide. I don't think her daughter committed suicide, but I'm not sure.
But then again, we'll
never know.
But I definitely think maybe she OD'd. Now I think if I remember,
not OD, but just
if I remember correctly, I'm not sure, so I want to somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe when you overdose, you didn't plan to overdose and die from overdosing. You just took a little, maybe even a little bit more than your body could take, and you didn't know that.
Looking for a higher high.
Yeah, you maybe took a little bit more than you took the last time, and your body couldn't take it, or maybe it could have been the same amount. And next thing you know, or maybe these people are taking more than their body, and then they thought they get lucky this time, and they didn't, and they died. I think that could happen with forgot that other guy's name. There were two people. I know the guy from that show on Fox. He died from an overdose, and then the guy from Brokeback Mountain, he died from overdose. There were two guys I remember that were popular back then who died from overdoses, and I thought the same thing in both those cases. That I guess I didn't know what overdosing meant, but I don't think they were planning on dying.
Overdosing, yeah.
I
don't think Whitney Houston was planning on dying. I think what happened, the heat from the bath.
Oh, I don't know what happened.
And the alcohol or drugs, whatever she was taking, mixed in, and she was higher than she knew, and probably went to sleep.
I don't know.
And sank down in that tub and died.
I don't know.
And some people were in the living room. She was dying in the bathtub, but she probably just didn't expect it.
Or we're talking, or the guy from Friends. You know what happened with him.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. I didn't prepare for this part, but because I don't know those names. But yeah, I don't know exactly what happened, because obviously if a person didn't leave a note, or that what their plan was, then the film is like, you can't really say what truly happened if they didn't leave a note or a manifesto or something like that about what they did not like about the world or what happened to them.
Yeah.
So it's hard to really, you kind of left with that open question when there's no letter or anything and about why they were wronged or what they didn't like about being in the world. So
that is true. That's true.
But in the case of the but one more thing, a few things. But like I said, being in the online sphere, there have been some online influencers I know who have committed suicide, and then I've thought to myself, I thought they should. They should go to church or get some religion. I'm not a religious person, but I do feel that the church, I believe, puts a lot more time and effort into trying to help people mentally. I do not believe that the government puts as much money in it as they claim to. Every time there's a shooting, you'll hear politicians saying, well, we need to put more money into mental illness. I've never heard any major amount of money going into mental illness. They say it, but when the time comes, you're like, I don't hear any major legislation of money going. When you hear billions of dollars going to all this stuff, I don't hear it about mental illness or the president hosting, either Biden or any president hosting a bill signing where a huge amount of money was going towards mental illness. But I will say, I do feel that the church, whether it be Catholic, Christian, whichever church,
Jewish,
I do believe that they will take the time to help as many people as they can. Not saying that there aren't high schools that have counselors or whatever have you, but there's a lot of kids in those high schools. I don't think they can help all of them, whether it be grief or what would happen in a situation where they don't feel loved or they don't feel like they're being appreciated or they don't feel like they should live anymore. Or whether even, so I obviously it's on those individuals to make the first step. And it's hard to single them out, and like I also said, there's too many kids in each school to go to each one and see what's going on in their lives and where they feel things need to be corrected. But it's just so hard, when whether it be them having some sort of grief, right? Or in the case of them having, let's say they have grief and then they act out on that grief, and then they in turn cause other people to grieve for them if they decide to take their own life or take other people's lives, and then that person who took other people, they ended up in jail, and now their parents are grieving because their son or daughter is now in prison. So even though, look, I don't know this, you could say it's a selfish act on their part for not understanding the grief they would cause other people if they take their lives or they take other people's lives. But like I said, it's very hard, and that's why I think the church could be very helpful, but it's also upon that person to take that step. Because I don't think anybody, whether it be the church or a high school counselor, what have you, is going to be able to see who all the people are who are having the problem and seek them out. Because you can't scan all millions of people. How many millions of people in the United States? How many young people are there? The problem is, kid, unfortunately, has had bad thoughts about doing bad things. I think every kid, even me, maybe. You're just hoping that they don't act on it, that they don't do something very bad. And then you even question, well, is it better that they do something bad to themselves versus other people? And then you're like, oh, that's rough to think about. So I don't know. It's hard to say what to do in this situation, and it's kind of hard because you don't even want to go to every kid that has a bad thought and saying, oh my God, this person's going to do something bad. This person's going to shoot up something. This person's going to take their own life. You don't want to do that because I think there are so many, like I just said, young people who may have had that thought and somehow found a way through it. Not that it was even church. Sometimes you can even say it was just a phase they went through. I'm not saying it's a phase that every young person goes through, but did I ever go through it? I don't know. Maybe, but that was a long time ago. Now I'm 39, right? I don't remember if I went through that. Maybe I did.
Thinking negative thoughts.
Or
doing something to yourself.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't remember. That was a long time ago. But I made it through. I don't think I did.
I think that's where church comes in. Because you say that you're not that religious, but I must admit, I may not go to church every Sunday, but I am very religious. I believe that you can do anything with God's help. That if you're having problems, you have to take it to the Lord. I do believe that. And I believe the teachings, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou not cover somebody else's wife, neighbor, being kind to people. I believe that if you're thinking negative thoughts, that you should seek counseling. Even though I believe in that God will help you if you pray. Prayer changes things. But now I also believe that you should seek counseling, mental health counseling. And I think I told you that from when I was very young, I experienced anxiety, being anxious about things, and always being kind of like a worrywart. What happens if something happened to my mom and dad? What happens if this? I used to be kind of like a little worrywart. And I remember when you were born, every night I prayed. I said, God, don't let nothing happen to me or dad or your dad. Because I wanted us to be here for you. And I think I prayed that probably the first 18 years of your life. Because I just wanted to be here for you. And I didn't trust other people to be as good to you as I knew we were going to be to you. So I believe that we should get help if we need help, and we should talk. One of the things I must say about myself is that I've always talked out my problems. I'm not sure if I told people early on about my anxieties that I felt, because I really didn't understand it myself. But when I started to have panic attacks, that's when I started to talk to people about it, and start to seek counseling. And I realized that some of the panic attacks that I was having was caused by other people, my taking on other people's problems. So I had to start distancing myself from other people so that I could start to seek happiness for myself and not dwell on the negativity. And one of the things I wish I had learned early on, and I hope you will learn, and I think you're learning because you seem to be working on yourself when it comes to the importance of diet and exercise and being good to yourself and happiness, just being happy and joy. Not everything is going to be a sadness in life. I know when my sister passed, it was extremely hard to see sadness and joy at the same time. But if you remember New Orleans, when they have funerals, they always celebrate with a parade. When somebody dies, they're celebrating. So, and they talk about that in church now. So it being a homegoing celebration. So it's not always just depression. It's about thinking of the person and their how they live their lives, and knowing that that person would want you to live your life and for you to be happy and to move on with your life. And that's why how I think we should end our conversation with grief. That it's a sad time, but it's also, I like that idea of my mother saying that they're in a better place now. I like that heaven is a better place. They're not sad. They're enjoying themselves. They're with their families that have passed, their family members that went on to heaven before them. And so we have to move on, live our lives. And one of the things I've done since my sister's death that I got back into was exercising. And I noticed my niece, her daughter, she's exercising. She puts videos online of her exercising. And I think what helps there is when you exercise, you release endorphins. Endorphins are mood boosters, and they, promote a feeling of well-being. So I think, and I love this Let's Move movement that Michelle Obama had years ago, and to be joyful in life and not always think of the negativity. And we need to seek happiness and joy. So you want to end on that note? That's a happy note, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I enjoyed it, James. This is our second podcast, and even though it was about a sad topic, grief, I'm glad we got a chance to sit down and talk about it, because all families should do this. Sit down and talk about death and dying and joy and happiness at the same time.